Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Opapari, and this is the Songwriters on Process podcast. Since 2010, I've been interviewing songwriters about their writing process. And on this podcast, we go deep, deep, deep into the writing process, far deeper than the usual. Do you start with the lyrics or the music question? By way of background, I have a PhD in English literature, and I'm a prose writer myself. I'm not a songwriter. In fact, I've never written a song in my life. But my goal has always been to treat songwriters the same way that we treat prose writers and poets, just as writers, plain and simple. And I've always been interested in the writing process. This is an intelligent conversation between two writers. And on this podcast, like I said, we go deep into the process. We talk about rituals, the seeds of inspiration, the role of movement on the process, writer's block, the revision process, pens, pencils, types of paper, and of course, we talk about books. You can find all the archived interviews on the Songwriters on Podcast website and across all streaming platforms. And with that, let's dive into this week's episode. And today on the podcast, we have Phantogram. Both members of Phantogram, Josh and Sarah. There is history here with this podcast. Way back in 2010, when I first started this website, 400 plus interviews ago, before it was even a podcast, and I just transcribed interviews. Josh was one of the first interviews I did, and I remember two things about that interview, and I actually reference what he told me in a lot of interviews with songwriters I do now. One, Josh told me, and this was 14 years ago, and they lived in upstate New York, how he was inspired by the sound of cars going over those covered bridges in New England, the thump, thump, thump. And the other thing was the author, Brees DJ Pancake. And I remember I never heard of Brees DJ Pancake, and he mentioned that name, and I thought, what the hell is this? What kind of name is that, Brees DJ Pancake? What even is that? Set it aside, and then a lot of songwriters started mentioning him, and I thought maybe I should check this guy out. Read his book, his one book. I won't go into his tragic backstory, but I will link to the book in the description. But check out Brees DJ Pancake, one hell of a writer. I pay it forward and mentioned him to other songwriters. I had Digo from Fontaines, DC on the podcast about a month ago, and he said the same thing I said when I mentioned Brees DJ Pancake. He said, what kind of name is that? But he wrote it down, so hopefully I'm paying it forward with other songwriters. The latest Phantogram album is called Memory of a Day, out now on Neon Gold Records. I really enjoyed this interview, talking to both of them, but I felt like we could have done this. This belonged in the 1950s, and here's why. One, they still use dictaphones. I'm not talking dictaphones with the digital recorders. I am talking old school, legit, original dictaphones with the micro cassette tapes in there. They still use those as a part of their process. Amazing. Number two, we even talked about what it was like to wait for the school bus and I thought, wow, when's the last time I've thought of waiting for the school bus? But we mentioned that in the context of the importance of boredom to the creative process. And lastly, Sarah's a big collector of typewriters, and I'm talking, the old school, not the electric typewriters. I'm talking old school original typewriters, and she still uses those. And wow, I thought that's amazing. That old school, how ultimately when it comes to creativity, you don't need a lot. So I enjoyed that part of the conversation with them. Anyway, had a lot of fun with them. Again, the new album is called Memory of a Day, out now on Neon Gold Records. We went deep into the process on this one. So take a listen. Here is Josh and Sarah from Phantogram. Let's get started. Josh, I want to start with you first, because I mentioned earlier that I interviewed you, and when you, in 2010, talked about writers, and you mentioned Brees DJ Pancake. And I said, I'd never heard that writer before. And I said, what the hell is this? I've never heard of this guy, Brees DJ Pancake. That's not a real name. And I I was like, set it aside. Songwriter after songwriter started mentioning him.
Really?
And then I started to dig into it, and I read the article in the New Yorker about him, about he wrote one book and then committed suicide.
Yeah.
Read the book, and I was floored by how good he was.
Yeah.
So, first of all, thank you for that, because yeah, um, yeah. So my question is, you know, let's talk about writers first for both of you. We'll start with Josh, but I mean, I guess who are you reading now? And I guess, does that influence you as a songwriter?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I did an interview a week or two ago with this guy named Justin Jay, and it was a podcast called The Plug. And the last question was like, "Is there anybody you'd like to plug at the end?" And I was like, "Well, there's this writer, Breeze DJ Pancake, that I don't think many people have heard of." And I was jogging my memory, and I'm not sure if I told you that I learned about him through an interview with Sparkle Horse, who I'm a huge fan of. Um, and but I just started rereading his short stories. I lost my old book, so I ordered a new one. And yeah, so I've actually been rereading him. Wow. And yes, and what else am I reading right now? Well, trying to think. I just got back into John Kennedy Toole again.
Nice.
And reading A Confederacy of Dunces, which is a great book. I've read it about 4 or 5 times already. I just keep going back to it. Um, I'd have to look at what I always end up going to Bukowski for some reason. I don't know if it's because I uh, kind of relate to his, I don't think I'm as much an asshole, hopefully, but I definitely relate to his um, plight, if you will. And, so I'm definitely reading a lot of Bukowski, and um, I'd have to look at, you know,
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, how does, because I mean, songwriters, some mention DJ Pancake. I mean, there's been a
yeah,
bunch, but I get,
interesting.
yeah, I mean, it's funny because after you said that, like, so many people, so many songwriters, um, and I think it, to me, has to do with, because I hear Brees DJ Pancake, I do hear Bukowski, I hear Vonnegut, Raymond
Mhm.
Carver, Cormac McCarthy are like the big five. Um,
Yeah,
my guess is that for songwriters, because they focus so much on economy of language, that's why they appeal to songwriters. So is
yeah.
that what you like about it? And I guess, do you think that directly influences your songwriting at all?
Well, I mean, I think writers, specifically like Ernest Hemingway or Brees DJ Pancake, they have a very simple yet beautiful way of putting you in the story, and it's and being able to visualize these such beauty um, with simple language,
Yeah.
and there's nothing completely over your head, and it's not insanely esoteric, but it brings you into this world and this feeling that, for me, um, I think I'm trying to do lyrically in Phantogram, bringing people to a place that isn't necessarily too abstract, although it can be, but conveys some kind of almost what's the word? Just a deeper feeling beyond like a visceral feeling in a way. You know,
Yeah.
that's kind of how writers like that hit me, and that's the goal in how we write music.
Yeah. And he is called, Pancake is called the Hillbilly Hemingway. There you go. So he is
Okay.
actually.
Oh,
All right, Sarah, how about you? So, um, who do you like to read, and how much does that influence your creative process?
Um, the things that I love to read are lyric books, and from other artists. I like diving into one specific band, and I'll go into each song and which is actually something that is very inspiring to revisit a song that made, like a David Bowie song that I never once really knew the actual lyrics, and actually bringing them up and reading them while the song's playing, which is a huge it's like a new thing. I guess everything you can do it on Spotify and stuff, but I find as a musician and a songwriter to kind of see things printed out as another songwriter or lyricist would, and seeing how even just the wording is, how it's presented, if it's a poem, if it's a if it's a paragraph, or and the way that kind of we do it is specific as well. But that's my go-to for inspiration to write my feelings down for a song. I also journal and I express it all out, but those are kind of the ways that I become influenced, is with just other artists and their lyrics.
So what's funny about that is that a lot of songwriters tell me they get ideas when they mishear lyrics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, but you're actually reading them, so you're not mishearing them. So I think that's interesting that I also hear that, oh yeah, it's not that, but actually, wow, that's kind of cool if it did say that.
Well, that is what we do with our own songs. When we lay down an idea vocally, it usually starts with maybe a few words, but it's mostly just gibberish. And then when it's recorded and we sit with it and listen to it, our ideas the gibberish turns into like a fluid kind of idea, and it allows our imaginations to kind of open up, even if it's not even the word that we were even thinking of. But we'll lay down the idea from gibberish. So we kind of do that in our own ways.
Yeah, sort of like making sense out of the gibberish, like kind of really sitting down and dissecting it and giving it meaning. It's funny how you mentioned like David Bowie, which I was going to say, like, definitely like William S. Burroughs with his influence with the whole cut up technique and stuff like that. It's really fun to kind of read something like let's say just Naked Lunch, for example, and then like see how David Bowie's lyrics are constructed, especially on like records like Hunky Dory and stuff like that. It's not only it brings you to this other world that's abstract, but also we pay attention to add on to what Sarah's saying, is we pay very much attention to cadence and how things flow, and sometimes not pay too much mind as to whether or not it makes exact sense, because sometimes words just sound good together, you know? And that's something I kind of became influenced by John Lennon, reading like his interviews, like especially his last Playboy interview. People would, the interviewer, I forget who it was, asked him, what does this song mean? Whatever. He's like, it doesn't really mean anything. It's just this string of words sounded great together and looked good together, and aesthetically.
So the gibberish thing, I mean, I think around the time I first interviewed you, I'd interviewed Jack Tempchin, who was a songwriter. He wrote he was one of the songwriters for the Eagles. He wrote one of their big songs, I forgot. Anyway, and he said that when he and Glenn Frey would get together, they did the gibberish thing, but he gave that name a voice. They called it El Blurto. And El Blurto was the name they gave to that gibberish, because they did the same thing. Yeah, and giving it a voice like legitimized it. It was like a part of the process. But my question, I guess, to both of you is, okay, so you have that gibberish. Does that gibberish remind you, when you see it, of a word or a sound, if that makes sense? Because I see it could go two ways.
Well, for me, and I'm curious about you, but I'll just speak for myself. I think that like because often this gibberish happens while we're playing together, and the feeling of the music sometimes informs the gibberish, which then kind of shakes hands with the sonics of the sound and like informs the content
Mhm.
of the song in a way.
Yeah, it kind of all comes together in all in different, I guess, wavelengths, but um it also, the word, like, kind of, I'm trying to think of it like a well remembered gibberish line of ours of like, hey, that kind of sounds like Lucy's Underground, or like that kind of sounds like you're saying, like, or maybe it's not this name, maybe it's a different, maybe, and it like it paints the palette of where the empty space of the when the writing is all, because it does happen a lot very quickly all at once. I mean, it can take forever to finish a song, but like the idea always really just happens all at once.
I think Lucy's Underground is a great example where it's like we're writing when I'm small and singing like "When on the ground and so down," and then it's
Yeah.
like Lucy's Underground, and then we start building a narrative on top of that and
Yeah.
telling us
And,
kind of a weird story.
and who is Lucy and why is she underground? Does Lucy mean anything to us? And bringing it into, meaningful, poignant moments in our lives, and
Mhm.
what just, all of the things, but it paints all of those soundscapes all at the same time, if that makes any fucking sense.
No, it does. It
Yeah.
does. And here's what I'm interested in. So if the gibberish is the first draft, is when the gibberish becomes a regular word, is that the final draft? I guess my question is, do you revise or after that? Because I see that gibberish, that's like a rough draft as a prose writer, right?
Well, right. That's the hard part too, is the gibberish holds a particular feeling and emotion in the performance, which is just laying down a performance that you can never redo again. It's like that is what makes the sauce of the song sometimes. Then going back and placing words where the gibberish was can sometimes change the feeling of the performance. And sometimes it's you just getting used to it because it could be demoitis or things change. But we'll go through, change the gibberish to more meaning, then re-record it again, and then change those words to make it feel a little bit better. Maybe take out words because there's too much words in a sentence, and it's causing chaos with the bass or the drums. So it's an ongoing edit until the last, ending of the song. We'll go in and very strategically edit it until the end.
Yeah.
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 But the performance of the first gibberish, I think, holds a particular space.
Yeah.
That
It's
like
super important.
always trying to go back to that, like that feeling.
It's super important. Yeah. Because it establishes like the vibe and what is truly naturally coming from within.
The energy of it. Yeah.
And also that gibberish does hold a certain cadence again, like a rhythm that if we were to ignore it, we'd lose the essence of how the song is really coming together. And it's important to pay attention to your gut feeling, your natural instincts, I think, because that's what makes the best songs for us, is to stick with that idea and roll with it.
So those songs that happen quickly, are you less likely to revise those because of the the authenticity of the emotion that they came from.
In a way, I mean, like as Sarah said, they will become revised, but I think not as much. I think what we'll do is just try to make sense of the meat and potatoes, and then add the gravy and the carrots and the spices to it.
Yeah. I like a good stew metaphor. That's good. So, all right, Sarah, so you journal. Is that something you do regularly? Does that ever, and I like that because a lot of songwriters tell me they journal, but some of them have like maybe word counts or pages or questions. And then I guess I'd like to know more about that, but also how much does that influence your creative process as a songwriter, if it does at all?
Yeah, it definitely does. Well, geez, not even I don't even know what day it is, but I got maybe 5 years ago bought a typewriter. And it was just a analog one not electric one. I now have an electric one, and that's like fucking massive and so much fun.
She collects typewriters,
I
by
like
the way.
I like pens and paper and typewriters and weird shit like that. And I got very much into it during the pandemic, but it also held a space for me to journal um full feelings and thoughts, having it being tangible, and not having to wait for it on to for my fingers holding a pen to like get it out. Because I don't really see the interest to me in like sitting on a computer and journaling. To me, I wanted to feel the paper and just the idea and the sounds of the keys and all the things. Super lame, but also so cool. I love it. But it held a space where I would just allow my brain to go as fast as possible and just not even worry if it's not coming out right or it's typed incorrectly, and just like throwing up basically all of my feelings. And I would do that every single day. Sometimes I would do it in the morning. Sometimes I would do it drunk. Sometimes I would do it high. Sometimes I would do it before coffee or in the middle of the night. Like it would just, and every single thing would come from a story. I mostly realized that I liked to tell stories, and not just get out my feelings, um, which is, I guess, maybe the songwriter side of me. Because sometimes you think journaling is just like I feel this way and this is what is that. But I would write these stories about just me turning into whatever I wanted it to, because it was as fast as I possibly could type. So I've found a lot of influence in that, and just kind of throwing up stories, and revisiting them back, and also writing poetry, typing it out, seeing it as a space, using it as like just like a tangible, I forget the term of the poems that have different shapes, but I would make designs. Just like had a lot of time to do anything. Haikus, I don't know, just any type of stuff. So that is kind of the story a little bit about my journaling.
Okay, so where does a pen and paper fit in? Because you said pen and paper too.
Well, it depends on the type of day I want. I collect paper, and pens. Sometimes, well, on tour, I can't bring my typewriter, so I write and spend times very patiently and spending time with words and more tight knit types of ways.
Okay, so I mean, songwriters are incredibly particular about color of ink,
Mm.
brand of
Yes.
pen, and even
Yeah.
type of paper, like lined versus unlined, graph paper. The shit I hear is crazy. I mean, so
I am one of those. Doesn't give a shit, which I love. We're the complete opposite. He will write chicken scratch on a like a sticky note and just kind of be like, all right, saving it. Here we go. This is what we're going to use. And I really like to see it. And I guess, I don't know, believe it, or I'm not sure what it is, but we're very different in that way.
Wait, so what do you have a favorite color and a favorite type of pen?
I have this paper that I use. It's called stone paper. And it's waterproof, and it's soft, and it's thick, and it's wobble. It's like you can't rip it. It's like strange. Yeah, it's really weird. Stone paper. And then the pen, I like to use a fountain pen, a really stupidly expensive fountain pen that I lost once, and my life was ruined for about a year, and then I found it. So
I had Jerry Harrison of the Talking Heads on about a year ago, and he said that it's got to be felt tip because he has to feel the scraping of the pen on the paper.
Oh, interesting.
Think about the tactile. But you said fountain pen. I've never heard that
fountain
before.
pen or pencil, the different types of pencils, all different ranges from soft to hard. I mean,
okay. So I hate to like go deep into the weeds on this, but I do think it has to do a lot with like confidence and kind of and just and comfort level. But so I know this sounds very minutia oriented, but you know, the advantage of a pencil or the advantage of a pen is that you can you know, cross things out, but they're still there. With a pencil, you erase and it's gone forever. So, you know, which do you prefer in those?
Both. But I also really love rewriting lyrics, and erasing when I'm just coming up with, if I'm just writing poems of my thoughts and I want it to be really clean because I want to re-look at that page that is so important in my book. When it's sloppy and like scratched out and shit, I want nothing to do with it. I don't want to even want to look at it because I just know that it was a different time of day or something, or a different feeling. Yeah, I don't really know, but
yeah, I love it. So Josh, you know, what I've also heard is that by writing lyrics on, you know, the back of hotel like bills or posters, is that it makes it less precious in a good way. Like there's less, if I've got a fancy notebook, then it's more precious and then there could be more pressure. But what I hear songwriters tell me is that when, you know, when you're doing it anywhere, then it takes the pressure off of you. So
well, I think a lot of it is more like spur of the moment ideas. I don't like to have to wait for the perfect setup to write. I do have many, many, many journals that are filled, like stacks of journals that are filled. And I do actually have a favorite pen. It's a Pilot G2, which is very basic, but I like the way it bleeds. I like that when I'm thinking and it's resting on whatever piece of paper, it just kind of bleeds and you can sort of see going back like where I was feeling mentally.
Right.
And I write very erratically. My style changes all the time. But
you also always write things down, and it's never a like put it in your notes on your phone. Like it's always it has to be written down.
Yeah, I
Which
write.
is interesting.
Yeah, my studio has all kinds of pieces of paper everywhere, and I'll have to sit down and go through a million sticky notes or backs of napkins or whatever, and just kind of place them on the floor and look at them, and you know,
Tangible
like
ideas, tangible thoughts.
yeah, try to make sense of things, maybe put them together and see, you know. But one thing I really like doing is I like sitting down and coming up with song names, and I'll just spend like so much time just like, here's a cool name for a song, and then I'll work from there. This is my prompt. This is the name of the tune. What am I going to write based on the name of the song?
So, okay. So I want to really quickly before we come to that, I'm also amazed that you don't use it seems like the most spur of the moment way to write ideas down is on your phone. And honestly, like you, I think are the first two that told me that you deliberately don't use your phone for those spur of the moment ideas. So why not?
Yeah, well, because the spur of the moment ideas usually don't just pop up in our heads when we're like walking down the street. We're in the think tank space, where it's our number one priority is to get it out. Because that's just kind of the way that we've always worked, not like just randomly, oh my God, the song, I gotta write it down.
I mean, I have started writing up
I've never had,
on my phone. Yeah,
but
but and I do write a lot spur of the moment. Sorry, but
oh yeah.
yeah, no, it's
That goes against what I hear a lot, and there was an article in the Washington Post about a year ago about why we get our best ideas in the shower. That the eureka moments happen when you're not thinking about the eureka moments, when you are walking down the streets. Because so that's why I find what you say, Josh, so interesting, because most people, I couldn't, if I sit down and say, I'm going to write a song title, I'm not going to write it down because I'm thinking about writing it down. It's going to happen when I'm in the shower. Agatha Christie, I always quote Agatha Christie because she said the best time to write a book is when you're doing the dishes. And that idea is those ideas come to you when you're not thinking about them coming to you. So that's more of a comment, but that's really, wow, that's a really rare thing I've heard, they don't happen when you're in those moments.
Yeah, the only time it does happen in those moments is when I'm dreaming, and then I have a dream book that I write all of my dreams down, and immediately when I wake up, because those are the times that something will come through, and our dreams always find space in all of our songwriting because it's surreal and abstract, and which is what we drive a lot of our lyrics from, is a dreams.
Right.
So
yeah.
dreams are part of it.
They say, to add to your point on the dishes too, is like walking is the best way to solve problems and figure things out. And it has to do with your eye movement and the lateral way your eyes move as you're walking. There's something very scientific about it. I'd have to reread it, but
Well,
it'd be interesting. If I find it, I'll send it to you. You probably
yeah. So okay, 2 points. One is I wrote an article in the Washington Post exactly about that about 5 years ago. So, but it's a little different. So what I wrote about was the impact that minimal aerobic exercise has on creativity after the exercise. Okay, so the chemical in the brain called brain-derived neurotrophic factor that gets secreted through increased blood flow, which is exercise. Okay, so what they did was they put people on a treadmill for 20 minutes at 60% max heart rate, and that's not much more than a moderate walk. Okay, and then after those 20 minutes, they give them a battery of tests measuring like higher order thinking, executive function. Those people always scored higher than people who didn't exercise. And the benefit lasts about 90 minutes post exercise. I've written about it because I'm a big runner too, and I'm fascinated by that idea. So that's a little bit different. Now we're talking afterwards, not during, but here's the parameter. It's 30 minutes, and I can send this to you. It's 30 minutes it's 30 minutes at 60% max heart rate. So it's not dose responsive. So 60 minutes isn't twice as good as 30. 90% isn't better than 60%. And it's not much more than moderate walk. Now, the only caveat is that ideally it should be something that does not involve brain power. So if you're walking New York City, that effect's going to be wiped out because you're trying not to be hit by a car. You should be walking in nature. When people, do you remember Wii Fit? Remember Wii Fit was around? So people who played Wii Fit, that benefit was absolutely wiped out because they were spending all the time exercising, thinking.
Okay.
So the research is fascinating. I mean, about the impact it has later. What you're talking about holds true too, because I think it just lets your mind kind of wander. Like I'm guessing, depending on where you walk, like if you're focused on crossing streets and things like that, I don't know, mine would be wandering as much, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. What's funny though, and yeah, everything you're saying makes total sense now that I think about it. But a funny thing that I've been feeling is we're in New York City right now. We're in Brooklyn, and we live in LA at the moment, and we've been there for almost 10 years. But we were in the city for a long time, and I feel way more inspired to write just based on walking around and stuff. And I know you got to worry about not getting hit by a car, but I wonder if even just the act of walking, period, like, because we live I live a very sedentary life in LA. It's not a pedestrian city. I wonder if just the act of walking in general or does it completely negate because you have to focus on.
Well, anything is better than nothing, right? I mean, I'm
Sure.
not going to sit and I think if you're getting out, but okay. So when you and I talk, you don't know this, but I quote you a lot in my interviews with songwriters because you said one thing
Mhm.
I'll never forget, and you said something when I talked to you, and you said that I think you were living in upstate New York, and this was like 2010, right? And if I'm correct. And you said that you got inspired by the noise of your car crossing over covered bridges, the
Yeah.
thump, 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 thump.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
always tell songwriters that because they tell me that they get ideas by turn signals, car alarms, like external sounds that influence them. And wow, when you said that, that really, when I quote that to people, it's like, oh yeah, like a lot of times when I hear things, so I'd love to know from both of you if external things like that inspire you. Oh yeah, that's a good sound.
Oh, all the time. Like I mean, I always think of sonic. I don't know if frequency is the right word, but just when I hear like a whoosh of something, or again, like driving over a bridge, like the hum sound, or when you get that Doppler effect of a train going by, and I take note of like how a sound like that could be implemented in a song, sonically. I'm always thinking about things like that. And
Yeah, you carry a recorder with you everywhere you go.
yeah, I
Always
carry a
recording.
dictaphone, a little tape dictaphone. It's in here somewhere. I bring it everywhere. Yeah.
What century, what decade are we in, by the way? We've talked about typewriters and literal dictaphones. I mean, with cassettes. I don't know. Are we in the 50s? I mean, what's going on here? You've mentioned two things. I know what dictaphone is, but I promise you, people are going to say dictaphone. They're going to have to Google that.
Oh, I mean, it's just a handheld tape recorder.
Oh, I know, but it's actually a tape recorder. I mean, it's not like, I mean, you mean actually with the cassette, with the magnetic tape.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. But I also like the sound of the pop and hiss of the tape.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like slowing it down and being able to kind of again analog, tangible things that you could record it on your phone, but it's not the same energy. Something gets lost in a screen, I think.
I had Britt Daniel on, and he told me that I love this story, and it's on the podcast, but he sits in a bar with a laptop and listens to conversations.
Yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, I think that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll do that sometimes and just write on a bar napkin. It's some just particular lines can spawn the craziest ideas.
I do that when watching films. It just like writing down particular conversations or whatever the narrative is saying. That's a lot of times too.
Yeah, I mean that's like I said, it's the songwriters who tell me they get ideas when they are gardening, vacuuming, right? And the Dilbert guy, Scott Adams. I mean, let's be clear, he's a horrible person. Like, let's get that out there. He said some horrible stuff. I always have to preface this, but he had an article in the Wall Street Journal a while ago, and he said boredom is the best time to be creative,
Mm.
because
Mhm.
that's when the ideas are coming to you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't
So
think people are bored enough these days,
Yep.
and that's what I don't like being bored. Actually, I'm not really, even when it was easier to be bored because there wasn't as much happening like digitally, with smartphones and all that shit. I was often not bored, but luckily because of an imagination. But it's good to like being separated from too many things is definitely way better for my creativity.
Yeah. I mean, again, like that is the thing with kids too, is that they're being sucked from their imaginations, and they're like, you have to fucking play and make up something in your head because there's nothing to do. Because the way that we grew up was that you got to sit and wait for your parents to be parents, and they're doing things, and just you come up with your own stuff in your imagination. But
Yeah,
it's strange
make
to
up.
see how kids don't have to do that anymore.
You don't even have to. I don't even remember what it's like to wait for a bus.
Wait for a bus. Yeah.
Like
Wait,
without
wait for anything.
and like sit with my
Sit
own
with your
thoughts.
thoughts. Yeah.
You know.
I like to do that. I actually do that often, even in like getting a ride in an Uber. I won't look at my phone. I'll look out the window, and it's kind of my space that I think. Um, but I won't listen to music too. I'll just kind of listen to my kind of thoughts. But it's again, it's not imaginative. It's just more of maybe being a grown up now with responsibility and having to think.
I mean, it's
About
actually
shit, but-
more imaginative than like staring at a screen.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Big time.
I mean, I read a lot of that research, and because as a writer, I think, and in any situation, we're doing it all wrong when we ask people to sit for hours, whether it's like in a classroom or at a desk. And what I'm reading now, the research is saying that after about 50 minutes, like 50, we're done. And what they're advocating now, Sarah, is what you're saying is sit for 5 minutes, literally do nothing, stare at the wall, don't listen to music, don't read, empty the mind, don't do anything, because doing that for 5 minutes recharges you.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Getting
even like in a meditative state, kind of.
anything, yeah. And anything where you're doing nothing. Like the key is it's not that you're doing another task, it's that your brain is doing nothing. And
Yeah.
that kind of supercharges. But it's getting people to understand that, realizing that, oh, that's not wasted time. That's making you more productive when you return.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm grateful that Sarah and I we're from like kind of the sticks in upstate New York, and we we have always been forced to kind of do things with what we have and use our imagination. Whether it was our complete environment being in nature or not being the most privileged kids with a lot of money, kind of creating things artistically with what we had, and being forced to do cool things with our limited resource.
And that's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget my book, Desolation, a heavy metal memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari, that is me, comes out June 25th on Hachette Books. Mark is a good friend of mine. He is one of the guitarists in the band Lamb of God, and this is his memoir. It's a damn good book, if I do say so myself. But again, that book is out June 25th on Hachette Books. You can pre-order it now everywhere, your favorite online bookstore. So be sure to do that. The site, Songwriters on Podcast, contains all of the archived episodes of the podcast. Of course, you can find them on all streaming platforms as well, but they're also on the site. I only have had the podcast for about I don't think even 2 years. Before that, all of the interviews were transcribed, and that took a lot of work. And that's why I started the podcast. So if you want to read the interviews that I did before the podcast, they are on Songwriters on Podcast as well. There are about 200 of them going back to 2010. So check those out. If you want to get a hold of me, ben@songwritersonprocess.com, or fill out a form on the website. I'm here for your questions, your complaints, your concerns, or your interview suggestions. I'd love getting those as well. So hit me up. I will try to respond. So that's it, everyone. Have a great day and see you next time.